Sa buhay mo ngayon, ikaw ay magsikap na pumasok sa landas na pinapangarap. Ngunit iyong pagkaisipin na kung ikaw ba'y handang salubungin siya, gusto ni Jesus ay makasama ka. Ang panahon malapit na ang pagdating niya. Humanda ka, humandang salubungin siya. Ikaw, ako, tayong lahat magkakasama. Walang mawawaglit kahit isa. Sarap manahan doon sa langit na bayan. Tuwa at kasiyahan ang mapapakinggan. Walang mararanasan na mga kapighatian. Doon sa Ama ang buhay ay walang hanggan. Ang panahon malapit na ang pagdating niya. Humanda ka, humandang salubungin siya. Ikaw, ako, tayong lahat magkakasama. Walang mawawaglit kahit isa. Panahon malapit na ang pagdating niya. Humanda ka, humandang salubungin siya. Ikaw, ako, tayong lahat magkakasama. Walang mawawaglit kahit isa. Walang mawawaglit kahit isa.
And continues to be on the books in many different states in the way of blue laws, of Sabbath laws. If you've been following our disputes, we've been proponents of Sabbath laws. A restoration of the Sabbath is the most concrete and material gift that we can give to our nation. So here I want to propose, as a bulwark, as a make-weight, as a condition for addressing material questions in a non-materialist way, our political commitment to God as a people, as the source and end of our good, and as the only intelligible way of making sense of the American good. A public orientation to God then reflected where? Reflected in concrete ways, in national holidays, in civic liturgies, in laws, indeed, Sabbath laws, Sunday laws that would require a cessation of what? Commerce. A cessation of all that commerce, of that Mac boondoggle or whatever that was delivered by that 75-year-old man on the door of the Papin residence on a Sunday morning. Could cease, and we could be free for one day, for God, for the debt that we owe to Him.
Something I really encourage, I don't see a big it's harder to see a big federal role for this. I think this is more a question of state and local law, is reinvigorating where possible Sabbath rest laws.
That's one of my points, and probably a point if we talk about the on-mill, post-mill distinction or difference. I just don't think you're ever going to escape the nature of politics, which is agonistic. There's a struggle. There's a point in which you debate, and then if you win, you win, and you essentially impose your will upon those who disagree. Essentially impose your will upon those who disagree. So I don't think you'll ever actually escape politics. And I think even if there is a sort of revival, I think if there's a revival in the United States, it's going to include a lot of Baptists as well. Mm-hmm. And many Baptists do not like things like even like Sabbath laws. And so in that sense, I don't think even like a revival itself can be sufficient. You still have to resist people, even the people who have revived.
Even the people who got you there.
Yeah, yeah. See, you're setting like those are creating conditions in which you can have a Christian civil law. Like those are creating conditions in which you can have a Christian civil law upon those who disagree. Like those are creating conditions in which you can have a Christian civil law. But even within your Christian camp, there's going to be disagreements. And if the Presbyterians are in charge, which is, most likely the case.
Well,
even with their minority status.
If you're post-mill.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, either way, they'll be in charge, right? So the Baptists are going to resist that, or some of them, not all of them. Many Baptists are, have wised up on that. The old Baptists would certainly be in favor of hey, no ordinary commerce on a Sunday.
So how much, when it comes to decisive political leadership at the top, supposing there's a massive general support in the population, not 100%, but let's say 55%, or there's a strong base of support, how much of an incrementalist are you? Does your ideal political leader get into power and then shoot the moon? Sabbath legislation, the whole deal? Or do you wade in from the shallow end?
Yeah, you always have an ideal. You have the perfect regime.
Does your ideal political leader get into power and then shoot the moon? Sabbath legislation.
I don't think, so you mentioned 55%. I don't think that you even have to have 55% of support or a majority. I mean, I guess I'm an elitist in that sense, but in the way there's a lot of people who will just kind of shift with the imagination set by the people, the ruling class. So you actually don't need like a majority support of the population. You just need a strong-willed minority, and then that ruling class can shape the imagination of the majority. Which I think Trump is doing now, because for decades we've had a very kind of weak right when it comes to imposing your will upon the executive branch. And now he's actually revealing to the country that, oh wait, there is this executive who's vested with the executive power who can exercise power within his branch.
Pretend we're still dealing with Biden and we don't know who's going to win the election. Speaking as a Van Tillian and a theonomist kind of guy, if the natural law guys got in control instead of the Democrats, I'd be thrilled out of my brains, right? And I think sensible natural law people, if the theonomists took over from Biden and were doing what they were doing, everybody would say, man, this is an improvement either way from secular godlessness, right? First, would you agree with that? And secondly, do you think it's important for theonomists and natural law advocates to be debating now?
Kingdoms guys.
According to a lot of the standard Reformed theologians, natural law, natural revelation, whichever way you want to put it, teaches us that we need to take a day off every 7. Right? That's a natural law thing. The scriptures tell us what day it is.
Right.
Okay. In the Old Covenant, it's the 7th day. In the New Covenant, it's the 1st day. So when you were referring to Sabbath legislation earlier, that would be the harmonization of natural law and grace completing nature. When the magistrate says ordinary commerce is done on the Lord's Day. We're not going to do that. That would be legit, according to you.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And that's actually why I think that's the reason why you can have a Sabbath law, for that very reason. So, and why it's on Sunday.
So
because you can. It's a natural principle, and it's completed by grace. And I'm not one of those guys. So they tend to want to separate nature from grace, such that the things of grace cannot be completed by nature. Which but by which I mean they don't think you can have a Christian civil society, Christian civil laws, Christian government, Christian matters. You'll see where I think you can. So if my sort of natural law guys were in power, I don't think it would actually be far from theonomy in power, because I see that there is a role. I mean, Scripture is a source of civil law, even if you are pro-natural law. When I say I'm pro-natural law, what I mean is that I think the foundation of all civil law is the natural law. And I think politics itself foundationally is a matter of humans, in their natural, as social beings, as political animals. But I think that you can fulfill natural principles by an application of grace. So what I mean is that I think it's a natural principle that the civil ruler should support and protect true religion. Okay, I think that's a natural principle. But grace, God has revealed that Christianity,
according to,
you can separate politics and Christianity. They actually relate to one another, such that you can have a Christian politics, or Christian government.
And Sunday observance would be a perfect example of that, because you have a natural element. The Sabbath was made for man. If we don't take the Sabbath, we burn out.
Right now, in light of grace, because of Scripture, the only way to fulfill the first table of the law is through Scripture.
Nehemiah, starting in verse 19, he enacts what we today would call blue laws. Blue laws are restrictive laws on Sunday that address things that get in the way of worship. And in the United States, it usually was around commerce, stores being open, and the sale of alcohol. But Nehemiah is enacting blue laws of sorts. He is prohibiting certain behaviors on the Sabbath day. So to protect Jerusalem from Sabbath breaking, what does he do? He shuts the gates of Jerusalem so that nobody can come in carrying their loads. They're not to be opened, these gates, until after the Sabbath day. And Nehemiah's own servants are stationed at the gates to make sure that people do not carry loads in and out of Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. You see in verse 20 and 21 this curious exchange where there are merchants and sellers who they can't get into Jerusalem, so it says they camped outside the gates of Jerusalem. And that's probably them setting up some kind of a temporary outside market outside of the walls of Jerusalem, saying to themselves, well, if we can't get into Jerusalem, we'll just set up ourselves outside the walls of Jerusalem, and we'll let people come to us. Well, what's Nehemiah's response to that? He threatens them physically. He says, if you do that again, I will lay hands on you. So that means either arrest or a violent assault of these merchants who are outside the walls. Sunday in our country is like any other day. In fact, we revel in making Sunday the opposite of what it should be. All the major events in our country, whether it be sports or entertainment awards or whatever it is, what day are those events always on? The championship games, the final. When are those events? Commerce, the Tyrians who are at the market in Jerusalem. The residents of Jerusalem have given a place on the Sabbath to the Tyrian merchants. Well, what's the modern expression of that? We don't ID people on Sunday, figure out what nation they're from, and figure out what they should be doing. The modern expression shouldn't be considered by way of nation. It's the principle of believer and unbeliever.
But do you realize it hadn't been too many years ago? I still remember it. Some of you may be less than 100, but they had what was called blue laws. Blue law. You remember the blue laws? Somebody raise your hand. You don't have any idea what I'm talking about? The blue laws. The blue laws were codified by a main denomination in America that was adhered to by every practice in business, that you closed the business on Sunday. It was in those days you couldn't go to a restaurant on Sunday. You couldn't even go to a drugstore on Sunday. It was the blue laws, as it was called. We've forgotten those things. We have abandoned the life of separatism from the world. We've attained the position that whatever the world does, we're going to embrace. Somebody said on one occasion when I was talking about that, say, preacher, if Christians wouldn't come to the restaurants, we wouldn't have to work on Sunday. You ever thought about that? These folks made a commitment, a pledge of allegiance to God, and in that pledge of allegiance to God, they pledged to be separate from the world, a life of sanctity before God. May I say, the Super Bowl, the supermarket, shouldn't make a difference in whether we go to church or not. We need to be in church and Bible study on Sunday, the Lord's Day.
I think the first table of the law, in other words, the first, second, third, and fourth commandments, should be enforced by the state. That there should be a punishing of idolatry, of suppressing of blasphemies, and a protecting of the Sabbath. So that puts me typically in the outer rim of the cocktail parties at the Libertarian Party. So I would say that I believe that the way we know a law is good or a law is bad is based upon God's law, that it is the judge of all human law. And I would say that there are, as far as circumstances go, you have conditions of order and disorder, a more or less settled civil order or state, and you can go from chaos and sort of a rule of man where you have wicked human law, and you can have reforms that are on the way to the mature polity and the mature system. But so, for example, you look at like Nehemiah, who is, when he's reforming things, there are people breaking the Sabbath. They're coming, they're like, you know, we'd like to sell grain on the Sabbath. We find that that's a good day to sell grain. And Nehemiah's response is to close the gates of the city. And then he threatens them when they show up again. And he says, if you show up again, I'll lay hands on you. And so he's increasing his exercise of coercive power. But he could have executed them. And so the idea that you can use, as you enact power, Christian power, you can use lesser penalties as you're rising to the condition. So the perverse persons of the land, I think Hezekiah, as opposed to immediately trying to execute all of them, what he did with the perverse persons of the land was he made it illegal and drove them out. And basically if they came back, then they would be executed. Right? So there's this idea that you can use lesser force in the process of bringing about reform, in getting to the place where you apply the law of God, the force of it in full.
Revelation 13, verses 15 to 17. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on the right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name.